Hey, brand builders, ready to take your brand to the next level? I'm Dana Ammons, and welcome to the Brand Blueprint. Welcome back to the Brand Blueprint podcast. Today, we're diving into the fascinating world of neuroscience, peak performance, and branding with someone who spent over 2 decades helping Olympic and professional athletes reach their highest potential. Now, joining us today is Dr. Murray Heber, a performance neuroscience scientist who is now applying the same cutting edge science of elite performance to help entrepreneurs and founders break free from burnout and unlock flow states for sustained success. And you probably are asking yourself, what is a flow state? We're going to talk a little bit about that, and Dr. Heber is going to break it down for us. He is the founder of MH Elevate and the creator of Flow OS, a 4-week sprint designed to help high achievers optimize their work, creativity, and energy levels. Now, we'll explore how understanding neurochemistry, and for those of you who weren't really good at science like me, you are going to love this conversation because Dr. Heber makes it very relatable and understandable. But we're going to break down how neurochemistry can elevate branding, improve decision making, and drive lasting consumer engagement. Now, if you're a founder looking to maximize your mental edge, this episode is for you. So, thanks again, Dr. Heber, for joining us. And I am excited to get in this conversation today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here. I'm really excited to have a good conversation here.
Now, before we get started, we always have our rapid fire segment where we just spend a little time getting to know you a little bit better. And this is not meant to be a gotcha segment, but more of a quick double click on some of the things that make you you. So, if without further ado, are you ready to jump into our rapid fire segment?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, great. Let's go. So, popular question, always the first question on the show: coffee or tea?
Coffee, for
All
sure.
right. Now, as a Canadian, somebody who lives in a cold area, do you have a preference? Are you, a guy who just go to Tim Hortons, pull up and just get it right out of the dispenser yourself? What kind of coffee do you do?
I like espresso style drinks. So whether it's just a shot of pure espresso or even to like a cortado or cappuccino, that's
Nice.
what I like. So usually we have an amazing actually coffee culture growing around
Yeah.
here. So
Yeah.
lots of small little places that do amazing coffees, roast their own beans, and that's usually what I find. And actually also in my travels around the world, that's always what I like to try and do everywhere I go is find those local coffee
Those
shops
local
to
coffee
to really
shops.
get a flavor of the community. So yeah, that's coffee all the way.
I love that. I love that. Now, follow-up question because you opened the door. Favorite place to travel outside of North America?
Probably some of the ones that have, I guess, sort of just been the most engaging, just from overall experience. I just absolutely cannot get over Cortina, Italy. Just
Wow.
fantastic, love it. Summer, winter, it's just beautiful. Yeah, it's amazing. It reminds me a lot around here. Big, nice. The Dolomite Mountains, but also just the coffee culture is
Yeah.
fantastic, and yeah, it's just a wonderful spot. Big sunshine. Great wines, great road cycling. It's a little piece of heaven.
Oh, I love that. I love that. You said great road cycling. I was going to ask like what the specialty of that area of the world is. Do you cycle and are you an avid cyclist?
Used to be a lot more. Now I got two little kids, so it's hard to break away for the nice, 4 or 5 hour blocks of time to go for a ride. So, yeah, but yeah, road cycling and then skiing, or I used to do a lot of backcountry split boarding in the wintertime. So that's where it has that nice appeal for summer and winter sports, just to be able to get outside and be active.
No, I love that. I love that. I'm an avid biker myself, mountain biking, road bike, gravel bike. If it's got two wheels, even maybe one wheel in some cases, I'll jump on it and try it, right? So I like you, I have had varying levels of success in engaging it, kind of swung with the rearing of my 3 kids as well. Now that they're out and grown, I'm finding myself getting back into it. And so I'll kind of wrap up the last question because you have this fascinating background having worked with world-class athletes and you've seen training on a very high level, but you've also now you've got this really fascinating neurochemistry background that also kind of informs your approach. What would you say is kind of for somebody as informed as you are and also as experienced around athletes, what would you say is one of your I would say more consistent or most consistent exercise regimens? Like if there's one thing that you do or you make sure you try to do on a weekly basis with regard to your exercise regimen, et cetera, what is that?
I guess it'd be twofold. One is definitely get outside, and especially
Yeah.
into nature if you can do. I like just sort of getting either the sunshine or also just the vastness of seeing the world outside of us helps us get outside of our own head. And then the other side I like to do is usually getting into some high intensity, whether it's with resistance training or even just if I don't have any weights around me, just even high intensity sprints, running stairs or
Mhm.
hills, just to push your own limits like that suffer fest. So you go and you push yourself to that limits. You keep in touch with yourself and know you still can grind when you need to.
I love that because I mean, if you think about it, and I work out in a local gym, the YMCA, and I see people all the time who I think do the opposite of that, right? Which is avoid that suffer zone, right? And you kind of wonder, right? Like, are you making any advances? Are you really moving the ball forward, even in your personal physical fitness? If all you're doing is coming in and staying in that comfort zone where you never quite really sweat, you never quite really get winded, you never really feel your heart beat any faster, right? But hey, you got the right clothes on, you're in there, you
Yeah,
got your headphones on, you're looking the part, right? So
yeah.
I love that because to the point, you are looking for meaningful results, right? If you got to get impact, why not in a small amount of time find something that has multiple benefits? And I love high impact training because to your point, you get more out of it than just the aerobic or just the particular physical motion you're doing. So really great advice. All right, now are you ready to jump into the main interview?
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right, Dr. Heber, let's go. So I would like to tell the audience before we get started, I had a great opportunity to have a conversation with you a couple of months ago as we prepared for this interview. And I was just fascinated with the amount of knowledge that you were able to share in such a short amount of time about neurochemistry and how you can get into a flow state, et cetera. But one of the things that I really wanted to start the interview off with is just really kind of establish your background and how you even got to this point of being this expert in flow and peak performance. So tell the audience a little bit about your origin story. How did you get started in this space? Going all the way back to you working with athletes prior to doing this.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I guess the beginning of all this whole, I guess, sort of lifelong pursuit has been just as a start off as an athlete myself, and then ultimately it was so doing all the right things that where you're digging in, you're grinding, you're doing all the hard work that especially gets into athletes, but also founders, entrepreneurs experience as well. But yeah, so doing all that hard work, but then it was injury that actually took me out of my pursuit. And so after a few times to try and keep going as an athlete, that sort of took me off the scene. So then I wanted to go through and actually work and support those peak performances of athletes. And it started off in the pursuit of like with strength and conditioning. So if we can go through and build a bigger, better, more resilient athlete, then hey, maybe that's going to be the thing to keep them at that high level, that sustained peak performance as long as possible. It turned out it wasn't the only piece of the puzzle.
Mhm.
Then it turned into looking at, okay, now there's other like movement mechanics, biomechanics, sort of more the metrics of how the body moves and what it wants to do kind of on its own. Like sort of drifts towards essentially almost like being as energy efficient as possible, which doesn't also equate to optimal movement or performance. So then got into the world of working with hands to actually mobilize joints and muscles and activate them so now you can get the right muscles doing the right job to actually unlock all of the power, the speed, the strength they have from the rest of their training. And that got to a certain point too, where it was producing really good results, but they were still fluttering. So even if they had like the physical capacities to perform at their best, then sometimes they would, and other times they wouldn't. And I was like, okay, well, what is that piece? So that all of a sudden led into this sort of
Mhm.
unconscious
Mhm.
control aspect. So
Mhm.
what's driving, the access to these peak performances? So that led me on this, deep dive into our unconscious and what governs motor programs. And it was through all that I looked at both like from a habit standpoint, like what drives movement and how we execute it, but then also what led into flow states. And so that was sort of the whole process that got me into that. And just a quick little cap here for flow states. If you don't know the words, the term, pretty much everybody's experienced it. That's where you just get caught up if you're in the zone. From a sports standpoint, it's like you get like time can usually slow
Yep.
right down. You see everything unfolding
Yep.
before it even happens. You can predict what's going to happen next. You can do no wrong.
Yep.
And from like an entrepreneur standpoint or founder standpoint, that's where you just get caught up in the zone. Sometimes over time can go fly by really fast. Like you're just working on something, next thing you know, 5 hours is blown by, and like where'd that
Yep.
time go?
Yep. Yep.
Those are the flow states, and when you're in them or afterwards, you're like, oh wow, that was amazing. But it's like trying to go through there and predict where lightning's going to strike. It's just sort of
Right.
a random chance, like, oh, that was great when it happened, but oof, that's it. So that's where I am now, is actually trying to go through there and help people take the steps so that they can actually now predictably, reliably get into those states more often.
Now, I mean, amazing journey. And I mean, you talked about some of the pivots you made as you wanted to learn more and understand more about the connection between the physical and then ultimately the mental. And then eventually that led you to flow states. Was that something that you did simultaneously through your early educational career? Did you go through all of the educational stuff first and then come out and say, okay, how do I want to use this? Tell me a little bit about like where the what the timing was, across this discovery process. Like, were you doing a lot of this early in life and then just kind of put it all together, or was it something that you just, over time kind of organically made your way to?
Yeah, I guess probably more of a organically made my way to it type of approach. But I think really when I look back at it, I was always curious about like from both myself, but then when I'm working with others, is like what is that peak performance? What does that look like? That's like
Mhm.
the unobtainable. That's your plus 10. It's like what we're always striving for, so we can never get there, but we're always working towards it. And now when I look back at it, it's a lot of it just comes down to having that growth mindset
Mhm.
where anything is possible and what can we do to go and get there. So even if when I was working in the environment, trying to go through and do all this stuff, my brain was always still like, hey, what else could be put into this? So it was always sort of working in the background to try and add more pieces and do this. And what I actually found from like the educational standpoint is not much of it really came from that. It sort of gave some of the foundation,
Yeah.
but it really is like if you want to go through and now pull all this stuff from getting these broad, vast areas and start to apply it in there, that's what actually grows again organically. That whole process as to where I sort of moved and evolved to, because it's not much of a there's like a program's like boom here it is and then it's this perfectly rounded package. Like no, everything is always growing and changing and more information is coming out faster than we can possibly consume it all. So it is trying to stay on top of it. And from both, if you look at sports but also with business, for me there's a big difference between being like world class and world leading.
Mm. Mm.
World class, that
Explain.
can be
Yeah.
where you get it from, like the best education, the best business coaches, the best out there. That's gonna be what is now that world class
Yep.
knowledge.
Yep.
World leading means if you're leading, then there's nobody in front of you. So it's
Yep.
you're out there, you're being the explorer, you're looking, you're trying to go and create new solutions to problems, which is again a lot of founders and entrepreneurs. That's where they're trying to be. That's where they're living is in
Yep.
this leading side of things. So it has to take both of that, where you can have that world class sort of knowledge experience trying to gain all that while you're trying to
Yeah.
pursue that world leading aspect of it to have the best sort of all well-rounded sort of practice and I guess sort of business or sporting experience.
No, I mean, it's a great point because you talk about those differences, but in the similarities between high performance sports athletes and high performance entrepreneurs or businesses, do you find that they are kind of stumbling into those flow states, so to speak, right? They don't exactly know how to trigger them, or they're not really sure exactly how the last flow state occurred, right? And so they're constantly pushing for that flow state. So talk a little bit about what are some of the maybe the common misperceptions about how to get to your flow state, and then ultimately what that looks like, right, in terms of repeating it and actually doing it as a systematic approach versus just hoping and wishing that you have that great
Right.
day where you lock in and just and super productive.
Right. Okay. That's a lot there, so I might drift
Yeah.
off. So just feel free to bring me back.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, no, that's a fantastic question. And really, when I look at it, like even if we look at, I'll just take a sport. So those who are
Yep.
performing in the professional, league of whatever sport it is, they're already at the top 1% of everybody who's doing that sport.
Yep.
And so one of the things that goes and gets them to that point is that they're able to go through there and find these flow states more commonly.
Hmm.
And so
Hmm.
it enables to get to like when those times get hard, they're able to go through and just grind through it easier. It's not even a grind, it's almost like this tailwind pushing you
Yeah.
along. So you don't have to save the really deep, grit for those times where it really matters. If you're grinding and have that grit every single day, you're going to result in burnout. And
Hmm.
so that's that natural attrition rate. So those at that top level, already the top 1% of those who are doing it. Now, if you look at that top 1% and break that down, there are the top performers within that.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
like they're just the ones who find flow states more regularly
Mhm.
on
Yep.
their own. And like so
Yep.
all of these top performers and peak performers, they're just ones who naturally find these flows. They don't even know why, but all of a sudden it just sort of can happen.
Yep.
And some people can find it more frequently, others not. And that's the neat part that's coming out now from the last, yeah, it's probably 15, especially 10 years of advancement, especially in neuroimaging. We're able to go through there and now look at what's going inside the brain when we are in these states of peak performance. It's like, okay, so we know that there's this, concoction of neurochemicals, so like the chemicals floating around inside of the brain that enable the brain to work at its best, and then also a brainwave state that makes it so that you're just present right there in the moment, and everything else is sort of outside of in your periphery. It's not actually impacting, your performance at that moment in time. And so it's been enabling that advancement in technology. And I was like, okay, these states are accessible almost all the time if we do the right things leading into it.
Right.
So that's now not a matter of having to just, oh, I hope it happens, which is still actually the common conception is like, oh boy, I hope it happens today. That'd be great if it did.
Yep.
But yeah,
Yep.
we don't have to leave it up to chance anymore. There's steps we can go through and do to get us at least right to the doorstep.
And you make a great point because I think there's either the hope that it happens or there's the belief in one singular approach or something that you felt was the contributor to you actually getting to that flow state. I know from an athlete standpoint, I've played over the course of my especially junior high and high school years with a lot of really top level athletes. And I remember always thinking to myself, watching, or competing against some of these kids, how are they able to consistently do X, right? Jump the higher than me, catch a ball with one hand almost every time. And my belief at the time, and I think a big misperception in sports is it's the practice makes, perfect practice makes perfect mantra, right? Like, oh,
Right.
most of these top athletes or elite athletes are able to dial in or tap in because they've done it so much. They've repetitiously got out there and shot 100 free throws a day. So of course the guy's going to shoot at 92%. And that's what you kind of convince yourself, right? It's just repetition, Dana. So a lot of kids out here, a lot of entrepreneurs take the same kind of approach, right? I think they just go out and say, man, I did this over and over and over and over again. And then when the time came, it worked. And so that must be how I trigger my flow state. So talk a little bit about like, I know that there are very similar kind of approaches to triggering kind of those flow states, but from a non-athlete founder entrepreneur, talk a little bit about some of those neurochemicals, dopamine and serotonin, and how they influence the person's ability to actually get to their desired flow state.
Got it. Okay, perfect. Yeah, so just to hit on one thing you mentioned there, the perfect practice makes perfect.
Yeah.
And yeah, that lands it even into like from a business standpoint, founder standpoint, there's a separation now between action and accomplishment. So
Mm,
we can be, taking all the right steps and doing all the right
mhm,
actions, but then does it translate into the accomplishment? So if you're,
mhm.
to keep it the basketball analogy, if you're shooting, 100 free throws a day, you're really good at, but all of a sudden now it comes into the finals and you're on the line, game winning shot. Did you make it?
Brick.
Did you accomplish what the goal was or not?
Right.
Like, so
Right.
that now was what tips into these neurochemicals and where they
Yeah.
sort of, land in terms of the brain. So if you get into that point where it's like, okay, now is this time where it really matters,
Yeah.
then if your body sort of, it's like almost like a knife edge. On one side of it, you can
Yeah.
tip into almost like this anxiety or this panic or this worry.
Mhm.
That's going to be governed by a hormone or a neurochemical. Now we're hearing a lot of it, like cortisol. So
Mhm.
cortisol is
Mhm.
good in
Mhm.
certain amounts, but if it floods too much and stimulates too
Mhm.
much of a busy overthinking brain where you're worried about all the what ifs and this, if I miss this shot, what's going to happen? Then all of a sudden that governs us and that takes out of our ability to perform our best. And we'll almost always find a way to mess it up and to not accomplish what we're going for. So
Wow. So, I
it's
mean, could you
really,
could you call, like, choking a cortisol attack of sorts?
yeah. Yeah, or like yeah, to keep it superficial, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Choking would be one of those things where you get sort of flooded and bombarded with the wrong sort of levels of these neurochemicals, and it sort of drives us to actually lose focus. We get more of like a tunnel vision in the sense that we can't see opportunities outside of us. We just get caught up in that grind
Yep.
all the time,
Yep.
and then yeah,
Yep.
then we can't see opportunities and we choke, whether it's
Yeah.
actually in sport
Yeah.
or in
Or in
business.
business.
So
Yep.
yeah, you got it. And so
I love it.
now to flip that over, when you get into a flow state, what ends up happening is that, that actually goes off the way. And now you get actually some of these positive neurochemicals, one being dopamine. We're hearing a lot about that these days, but
Man, a
it's sort of
lot.
the pursuit molecule. So it's not the reward one, it's actually you get kind of rewarded for the pursuit towards something. So it's trying to go through and obtain it.
Mhm.
So that helps out with just drive and effortless pursuit. And then that with norepinephrine helps us sort of go through and narrow and keep your focus on the task at hand so it doesn't just sort of go off everywhere.
Yep.
And then we have another one. This is one of my favorite ones is Anandamide. And what that one does, that one's why I also like to go out and do some like, cycling or running outside. Because when you look at vastness out in nature, it sort of breaks us down from our normal everyday where we're sitting at our desk, we're just sort of honed in through here. We get again, a bit of a tunnel vision. So we can't see opportunities outside of, so that basic creativity gets stifled because we can't see outside of our box.
Right.
So when
Right.
you get outside into nature and you start releasing more anandamide, then all of a sudden it's like, oh wow, I can see opportunities all over the place. And from that's the creative problem solving. That's also when these things just sort of descend out of nowhere, like, oh wow, there's the solution I've been looking for, but I wasn't even looking, it just landed upon me. So
And
that's
it's so
that neurochemical at
counterintuitive to
play.
your point because in business, over the course of my career, and I've definitely worked some very intense, high stress jobs and some high stress environments, and not making those experiences negatives because I had great times at P&G and Colgate Palmolive and SC Johnson Wax. But I do, to your point, remember thinking the opposite was true. Is that when my anxiety was high and my stress level was high, and I needed to get something done to really perform, I didn't need to go outside. Definitely didn't need to walk around because in my mind, I didn't have time for that. What I needed to
Right.
do was lock in, right? Like to find a way to block out everything I could. And if that meant turning my phone off, not taking any personal calls, right? Closing the blinds to my office, locking my office door, and just lock, and in my mind again, locking in, right? But now I realize, to your point, in many cases, all I was doing was just increasing my cortisol levels, right? Like I was just really just like in there
Right.
eating cortisol sandwiches for lunch. And
Yeah.
right, like, I think a lot of us do that. A lot of us go through that, like, struggle of, "Oh, okay, actually taking some time to walk outside." And I never forget, I had a boss when I worked on Park Avenue in New York, with Colgate, who used to always say about every couple of days, "Hey, guys, everybody drop everything you're doing. Let's go downstairs, walk outside, and take a couple of blocks of Manhattan in, and then come back." And we would just walk the streets of New York 3, 4, 5 blocks, maybe 20, 25 minutes, come back into the building, work again. And he never
Right.
really made a big deal about it, but I do realize that as that I started to adapt that strategy, to your point, I started to feel at least in a way refreshed from kind of all of the flood of that anxiety and stress and then kind of able to kind of reset the clock, so to speak, and start again. So I'd love now in the process of looking for ways as a entrepreneur, a founder, a brand owner to tap into those key states and really stay in flow. Talk a little bit about the risk on the flip side in terms of burnout and sustaining that high performance and what you could potentially do if you're not careful.
Right. Okay. So, yeah, like as you mentioned, they were just like you get into this, you want to lock in,
Yeah.
and yeah, don't get me wrong, that's a big, important part of both flow states and productivity is to be able to go through there, minimize distractions, because essentially, like opportunity is the death of focus. So when you got to
Hmm.
focus, then you got to
Hmm.
minimize all those other things that can pop up. And also for flow states, there's one sort of easy understand saying is flow follows focus. So if you're focused
Hmm.
and locked in on something,
Yeah.
then it's easier to go and get into
To flow
that
some.
pattern. So
So flow
there is,
follows focus. I love that. Flow
yeah,
follows focus. Okay.
yeah, so there is times where you gotta just, yeah, lock in
Yep.
on it, but also
Yep.
depends on what you're trying to do or accomplish. If you know the path that you're trying to do, then yeah, lock in and get after it.
Yep.
If you're floating through some uncertainty or ambiguity, and then what are you locking into? Lots of times you can lock into uncertainty and ambiguity. Oh boy, that's a scary thing for the brain. It's going to be whirling in all different directions. So that those are the times where you don't want to lock into it. And so is understanding a little bit of to like the where you are, what you're working towards, and what steps you need to go through there and do. So essentially, it was like looking for what neurochemical do I need right
Yeah.
now
Yeah.
to get me into that hyper focus state where I'm being
Yeah.
really productive versus get me into the state where I can step back, get into that sort of calm focus state, and then go and get to work on problem solving or whatever else it would entail. So now to take that to the point of getting into burnout, if you were in this sort of zone where you're just grinding all the
All the
time,
time. Right.
and especially if you are, oh, I have to do this for this reason, do this for this reason, and this for this reason. One of the big things is that you're going to be usually losing your autonomy. And really what that means is like when you start up your own business, it's like
Hmm.
it's you starting it up there. It's fueled
Hmm.
by passion and a purpose to go through and build something,
Hmm.
get out there. And you have the autonomy to go through and do it. And you know what this product is going to look like. So that is just rocket fuel for grinding effortlessly without burnout. That's what gets all the founders to a certain level. But then as soon as sometimes you get somewhere and it's going to shift or pivot to the point where, oh, now I got to do this. These people are asking for this, and now I'm going to do this. So now what we end up doing is we end up chasing around all these should do's or have to do type things, and we lose that autonomy because it's not really you wanting to or choosing to keep
Mm,
pursuing this.
yeah.
And so when you don't have that feeling that you are in control of your own sort of
Yep.
destiny to get it done, then that erodes passion. Now all of a sudden the purpose behind it starts to, wane. And it gets to the point where it's like, oh, this is just a grind. And then you
Man.
grind in that long enough, and that's where it's like cortisol is going to be high. These stress hormones are going to be
Yeah.
really high. You're not
Yeah.
getting the reward of the serotonin, the oxytocin, the endorphins, which make you feel good and make you feel like, oh, that was an awesome day at work. Can't wait to go through and do it again. All you're bombarded with is like, oh man, that was depleting. And then you're low on like some neurochemicals like a dopamine, and then you're going to seek it elsewhere because your body's like, man, I need something that makes me feel
To
good right
motivate me.
now.
Yeah.
So that turns
Yeah.
into you're going to binge watch a show, you're going to go through there and
Drink
put some
after
money on the
work.
game,
Right.
you're going to do
Yeah.
something like that to
Yeah.
find that little fix. So it's like those are the steps that just rob you even deeper and just keeps that downward spiral in towards a burnout sort of trap comes from. So it's
Man.
learning those patterns and how to apply those triggers for flow and the dopamine and the serotonin in a positive direction in your work, in your personal life, to now fuel it up so you feel 10 feet tall and bulletproof, every single day when you're going to work or, pursuing whatever it is that you're doing, whether it's work or personal, you name it.
I love this advice because I think people listening to this, some people will say, "Well, man, these concepts or some of these specific triggers feel a little bit complicated for me to master." But I don't think the concept of, you know, not having autonomy and not feeling like you have a bit of control over your destiny, over your career, over your project work definitely I believe wholeheartedly is something that a lot of us struggle with, from brand owners to founders to even corporate employees who are in those systems, because there is a clear lack of control and autonomy. You work for a bigger company, a brand that is much bigger than you and will continue to kind of move along with you or without you. And so I think in many cases it's almost self-fulfilling in the corporate sense, that some of us come in and just immediately adapt that mindset. So talk a little bit about some practical neuroscience based, strategies that you can use if if you kind of know you're already in that situation, right? Like, I know I work for a really, tough boss, and I work at a company that has high level expectations, and they dictate kind of what I do and how I move. Now I've develop some bad habits. To your point, I find my motivation in things outside of work that, frankly, in some ways, even further are compounding my problems, with regard to focus and stress. So, what are some strategies that a person can take to either reverse kind of the direction they're going in that sense? Because they're not gonna walk into Procter and Gamble today and say, "Yo, I'm not listening to y'all anymore. I need my autonomy in
Right.
order to get my groove back and get my dopamine levels up," right? Like, P&G's gonna be like, "Yeah, right, buddy. See you later." And so,
Right.
what are some ways they can flip that script without obviously losing their jobs?
Okay. Great question. And it comes up quite often. So I'm going to sort of do a backwards way to answer this. I'm going to tell a story from a hockey
Yeah,
player I was working with that actually took something from the corporate world and gave it to him in sport and worked out really well. So,
nice.
what this is actually is a practice that 3M uses and Google uses. Is called either a 20% time or 15% time. So it's basically it's having a small percentage of your time allotment to pursue your own interests as it pertains to the job, your work. But where it's like, yeah, you feel like you have basically giving you autonomy where you can, utilize some of their flow triggers of curiosity, creativity, novelty, where you're not just sort of stuck doing and executing what's being told to you.
What did he just say?
So it's basically it's having a small percentage of your time allotment to pursue your own interests as it pertains to the job, your work. But where it's like, yeah, you feel like you have basically giving you autonomy where you can, utilize some of their flow triggers of curiosity, creativity, novelty, where you're not just sort of stuck doing and executing what's being told to you. So how this worked for this hockey player was he had this coach that was basically like, no, here's how I want you to play. Do it this
Mhm,
way. That's it's my way or the highway.
mhm,
Like you
mhm.
got to execute on XXX or else I'm going to bench you. You're not going to play. And he wasn't happy because that was stifling his own play, like his own development as a player. Like he had to feel like he was just sort
Yeah.
of dumbing down his ability, and that harms his own future, his own career. And so then he was just going through there and butting heads with it, which either was like, I'm going to go through there and just sort of smash along and butt heads with his coach, which ends up getting him benched. Or he's like, I'm just going to go level myself down, numb out, lose my passion and play, which is going to result in poor play, and he's going to crash and burn at the end of it.
And be
So I
gone
gave
anyway.
him yeah. So I gave him
Yeah.
this idea, this 20% time. So it's like, okay, so now go through there and follow along what the coach is asking you to do for 80% of the time. Then within that, still carve out 20% of it that's for you. And for any coach where they have an athlete that's doing what they want to, you know,
80% of the time.
80%
Yep.
of the time, it's like, hey,
Yep.
that's a win. Great, we'll
Yep.
take that.
Yep.
And then the other 20% of the time, when you start to use those and flex that autonomy, guess what? You're gonna get more into a flow state. You're gonna perform better. You're gonna make things happen that the coach couldn't even anticipate, but of course they'd be beneficial for the team and for the outcome they're looking for.
Yep.
And that's exactly what happens. So the coach is like, wow, that's amazing. This is so great. Fell in love with this player and gave him more responsibility on the ice, gave him more runway, gave him more autonomy.
Wow.
So
Wow.
that's how that worked there. So to bring that back in now to a corporate setting, same kind of ideas. Like you can't go in there and yeah, like you said, you can't go in and just start smashing heads because it's gonna be like, okay, see you later, you're gonna be benched. But it's like within that time is finding those little pieces to carve it out. And then once it
Yep.
starts to go through and happen, now you're more productive in those tasks you have to do because
Yep.
this pursuit fuels you up. So you actually are getting more out of this as well.
I
So
love that
once
because
you do accomplish that, yeah.
that I want to double tap on one part of that you mentioned because I think this is something that a lot of listeners will relate to, especially those of us in really intense jobs or roles within our organizations, which is this kind of carving out some space for you to have some autonomy on your decision making. And I think in the corporate sense, what happens a lot is you get so focused and caught up on what's coming down from above you, so management down, that you forget that in many cases you also have responsibilities as a manager and autonomy as a manager to then affect others, right? And I think that's one of those areas, to your point, that you can carve out that I found over the course of my career gave me some autonomy. I might have to execute 80% to 90% of what my management has asked me to manage, and kind of deliver to my employees and to my team or my department. However, there's still 10 to 15 to 20% of autonomy there to shape it and create it and make it your own. And so you can better relate to your team, better relate to your employees, and ultimately, find some cohesion even in, scenarios where you're not necessarily happy with management's direction, right? So I love that, like taking some autonomy, but also understanding you work in this greater framework and system that you still have to deliver on a certain level of expectations. And 80%, whether you look at it in an academic sense as a B or as 80%, being closer to 100%, either way, I believe and agree with you that that is a sound approach. Now, what about those people who have athletes and founders who have failed in those attempts to not only hit those flow states, but really deliver on kind of the expectations, whether it was the hockey player and his role on the team, or a founder or a business leader in their role in terms of driving sales and profit. Talk a little bit about failure and how failing at something like that effort wise can lead to more negative behavior, and what's some practical advice to potentially, brace yourself for those failures in life and then maybe take a different mindset to reframe it.
Okay, yeah, that's a good one to always like to talk about. It's yeah, the failure, the reframing of that, and the Mike Tyson quote about everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. That's that. As a founder and entrepreneur, you're going to have that all the time, and it's like, oof, this is another hit. Okay, how do we go through this?
I
So
got punched out of my flow state.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. But now it's a matter of trying to see like it is a bit of a reframing where it's like the only way we learn is through failure, right? And,
Yep.
so it is like how does this land and how do we wear this? And now, I mean, it's a pretty loaded question, so to try and keep it superficial, um, the more immediate feedback loop you can have, the faster the tightening the learning circle is. And so,
Mm,
what I mean by that is, let's say you want to go out and learn how to, play golf
mhm,
and you're not a golfer already, so you do what we normally do. You go out to a driving range.
mhm,
But now, let's say you go out to the driving range and it's the middle of the night and you hit a bucket of balls. It's pitch black. You have no idea where they go.
mhm.
And then the next day you go back, you look where they landed. That night you go back out there, hit another bucket of balls. Like the feedback loop from what you see happening to the ball, which
Yeah,
you don't see until you actually see where it
yeah,
landed, that is so long that you could do that for
Yeah.
decades and
And not
not
get
really
better. Yeah.
advance.
Yep.
But what ends up happening is that if you go out there during the daytime and
Yep.
you hit a ball and you're
And
going
you
to go
see
through
it.
and see what happens to
Yep.
it, and like because it didn't hit exactly what you wanted to, that's a
Yep.
failure, right? That's an
Yep.
error in what you try. So you try and go through and try and correct that.
Yep.
And when you don't wear that failure as being like, oh boy, like I suck at this, I'm not, it's not for me. It's like, no, no, it's opportunity to try and go through and correct it.
And get corrected. Yep. That's a great point. That's a great point.
So if you're looking at your failures,
Yep.
like the golf balls at night, and you go back the next day, you're like, oh man, those are all terrible. How do I fix this? That is hard to go through and do. As
Yeah.
opposed to if you do it right in real time and tighten up that feedback loop, well, then all of a sudden you have something to work towards. It turns into micro steps. So failure is like, oh, cool, this is a neat opportunity for me to now change and improve upon this. So it's just learning those strategies as to how to do it. Because that they got one strategy is of like the tighter feedback loop.
Yep.
Now you're
Yep.
leveraging dopamine, norepinephrine to try and do
Yep.
it again and try and work towards it. The other side of it, it floods you with cortisol, and that's the overwhelm. It's like, oh man, how do I get through? How do I survive this one now?
That is
So
such great advice. I mean, the athletic side of it, I think people immediately get right, which is, oh man, I mean, that's such a great analogy you made because you could literally be slicing the ball every night, right? And every time you come back in the morning, the ball is 50 feet to the right. And so all you do is just adjust your aim 50 feet to the right and you slice it 50 feet more to the right, right? So it's such a perfect analogy. If you flip it to the business side, I think it's even more perfect. And I think those listening to me and who know these experiences are in these situations right now have to understand that sometimes we can be blinded by whether it's our pride, our ego, our our supposed, hey, I'm just a person who comes in and puts my head down and gets the work done, and not really see that your performance is not actually meeting expectations. And sometimes in some organizations, you might have a biannual review or even an annual review. And if you've got a really, call it insufficient manager, you may not get feedback on your performance for a full year. Right. And
right,
so not hearing, oh wow, I've been doing this report wrong. I've been showing up at these meetings not fully prepared. I've been insufficient in how I have, completed my reports. Why, most people will say, well, why didn't you tell me that? Right? Like that's
right,
usually a complaint. Why didn't you tell me? If you'd have told me that, I would have corrected. So it's so great to hear you kind of confirm that dynamic. Now, taking it one step further, is there a way that people can then structure feedback loops into their processes to ensure that they are getting and actually receiving the feedback? Because I will say, I learned a long time ago, sometimes you have to actually ask a person first, hey, are you ready to receive
right.
feedback? Are you open to receiving feedback? All right. That was a valuable lesson I learned early in my management career. So talk a little bit about how people can build that feedback loop and the expectation of feedback into their processes so they don't find themselves like, why didn't you tell me that? Right. When it's a
Right.
year too late.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And as you can probably tell, but now I always like to default to telling stories through sport
Yeah.
because it
I
makes
love
it
them.
clear to sort of see how in
Yep.
business. But the one thing I like with sport is that a lot of the ego is still sort of checked. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's still a ton of ego in sport. But what I mean by that is all of the stats, they're published.
Hmm.
Everybody knows. Like the person
Hmm.
on the couch knows exactly the stats of whoever they're watching on
Hmm.
TV. So it's like there are so many of these metrics that are out there and you can measure and compare yourself by. So you know where you stand. So that again, that feedback loop, it's tight. You
Yeah.
always know.
Yeah.
So you don't have to worry about in a year from now. So now you're going to get your batting average. It's like no, no, you have that every single time. But also within that, you don't have to wait to have something published and given to you. You know when you're at bat
Yeah.
if you hit it or not, if you swung too high or too low, or if they got you on that pitch, like like how'd you get me? I'm going to solve this one next time. I'm not going to let you do that again. So in business, those same stats, we don't have the on base percentage. We don't have these things to really
Mm.
go through and follow, but
Yep.
all of the things are there that you can now go and create your own
Yep.
feedback loops outside of having the coach or the manager tell you or have that annual review where it's like here it all is. So
Hmm.
really it does just take time. And where it all starts with is okay, well, what's your goal? What's your objective? So to go back to the baseball analogy, there's like you're at bat. Well, what do you want to do? You want to hit the ball. You want to
Yep.
make contact
Yep.
with it. Great.
Yep.
But you're not going to swing at every single one. You got to make sure the right one's coming through. So all these little pieces, but you have a clear goal or clear objective that you want to try and get through. So when you take a step towards hitting that ball, and either you hit it or you don't, well, when you don't, that's when the body's like, ooh, I was close. I can improve this or I can improve that. And then you go and you work towards it. And so lots of times we get into from the corporate side of it now, or the founders, entrepreneur side of it, is we don't necessarily have that clear goal, that clear outcome. We're just doing stuff to do it. It's like passively showing up to the bat saying, oh yeah, you should hit this ball. Okay, swung at it, didn't hit it. There's no consequences that we put onto it ourselves.
Yeah.
So we don't know how to change it, how to pursue, how to make it better.
Great point.
And the neat thing with as soon as you have those objectives or that goal in front of you, then all of a sudden it turns into, from a neurochemical standpoint, this is an unconscious, passive action that just drives you towards betterment. Like it makes it effortless. It runs the show for you. It does all the heavy lifting for you. So all you have to do is just keep doing what you're doing, and it's automatically going to try and course correct for
Mm.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like the baseball player's always trying to go and get better. The golfer out there is always going to try and hit it better, straighter, all the way. It doesn't take that much effort to try and do it. Small little tweaks of
Yeah.
consciousness, but really it's a matter of it does the work for you. So same thing in corporate and business is creating those feedback loops for yourself. And that'll keep you going. And then, yeah, if you can get if you have managers, whoever else on board to now tighten up those feedback loops, that
Yep.
adds more fuel to it. Absolutely. But yeah, you don't have
Love
to
that.
wait for it to come to you.
Wow. That was a really important point. Can we hear that again?
And so lots of times we get into from the corporate side of it now, or the founders, entrepreneur side of it, is we don't necessarily have that clear goal, that clear outcome. We're just doing stuff to do it. It's like passively showing up to the bat saying, oh yeah, you should hit this ball. Okay, swung at it, didn't hit it. There's no consequences that we put onto it ourselves.
Yeah.
So we don't know how to change it, how to pursue, how to make it better.
Great point.
And the neat thing with as soon as you have those objectives or that goal in front of you, then all of a sudden it turns into, from a neurochemical standpoint, this is an unconscious, passive action that just drives you towards betterment. Like it makes it effortless. It runs the show for you. It does all the heavy lifting for you. So all you have to do is just keep doing what you're doing, and it's automatically going to try and course correct for
Mm.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like the baseball player's always trying to go and get better. The golfer out there is always going to try and hit it better, straighter, all the way. It doesn't take that much effort to try and do it. Small little tweaks of
Yeah.
consciousness, but really it's a matter of it does the work for you. So same thing in corporate and business is creating those feedback loops for yourself. And that'll keep you going. And then, yeah, if you can get if you have managers, whoever else on board to now tighten up those feedback loops, that
Yep.
adds more fuel to it. Absolutely. But yeah, you don't have
Love
to
that.
wait for it to come to you.
I love that. I love it. Look, we could talk about this forever, but there's a couple of other things. Like again, we talked this before. You are such a talented individual with so many different things to offer this audience. So I want to talk about Flow OS. I mean, you recently launched this program. It's a 4-week sprint. It's designed to help entrepreneurs work more efficiently. I'm raising my hand because I definitely am a person who could benefit from that and unlock sustainable flow states. Again, something that I am always looking to do. So, can you talk a little bit about this program, how it works, and what kind of transformations you've seen from people using it?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. And yeah, really where this came from was I do a lot of my work just on like a one-on-one coaching, which gets in a bit deeper into some of the neurochemicals and the one-on-one steps. It's like having your personal coach for all these other aspects of peak performance. And that can be quite heavy and hard to take on. And then a lot of
Mhm.
people are just asking, hey, like give me the nuts and bolts as it pertains to what I need right now. And so that's where Flow OS came from, and the OS is just operating system, right? So that's it. Is how to go through and change your operating system. So really, you don't have to know anything besides follow these steps. I give the information that's behind us to this is why it's important,
Yeah.
because that's what creates the unconscious drive for this to happen effortlessly. And so this is really what it just breaks it down, and I try to tailor it towards what are some of the common pain points that experiencing, whether it's a burnout or a lack of creativity or creative problem
Mhm.
solving that takes place, how to reframe either the failure or the lack of success where you're stuck in the mud, how to go through there and get through these points, how do you find it when you're drifting on your passion or your again that sort of fulfillment that comes from it, how do you leverage now the neurochemicals from the steps and mechanics you do so that it actually takes less effort, less work, less grind to get better results. So the thing when you get into flow states, the science is really cool because you can actually you up your performance level 5 times. So if you can
Wow.
go and get into flow one day, one 8 hour
Wow.
day in flow, and if you're performing at 5x, that's like you can take the rest of the week off.
Yeah,
It's like
about to
this is
say, yeah,
awesome.
I'm in that real 3-day work week, right? Forget 4 days. It's
Yeah,
like something about Mary. We're about to do 2-day work week, 2
yeah,
day work weeks.
yeah. So that's what this is all about, is whether it's those macro flow states, but also just like
Yeah.
is getting you to the doorstep so you can set the neurochemical environment so you're ready for that success, and then get the brainwaves into it. So back to it, it's like probably the best analogy. I better work on another one, but if we're keeping with it's like when lightning strikes and trying to predict it. So yeah,
Yeah.
I can't go through and make the lightning strike you every single time, but man, we can make one heck of a good storm that's full of static electricity. So it's like it's more apt than not going to hit you or get real close to you. So that's what
Wow.
the Flow OS is creating that operating system so that it just does the work for you, does all the heavy lifting, and you just show up and you get so much more out of it, and you feel more rejuvenated. The more work you do, the more fulfilled you feel, which is usually the
Yeah.
exact opposite of what
Yeah.
entrepreneurs or founders get to when they sort of seek out this kind of a program or my help.
No, that's a good point because I mean usually completing a lot of work feels like workload, right? Like it's just like, oh, I lifted a lot of work. But if it's great work and great productivity, creative stuff, you're solving problems, man, if you feel elated, right? Because in the
Yeah,
entrepreneurial sense, you're likely saving money, you're solving problems, you're likely being more efficient, thus being able to deploy your energy and your efforts to other things you really want to spend time on, right? Nothing worse than being a founder or a business leader and you have to do some aspect of your workload. For me, it's end of the month invoicing and balancing the checkbook and bill collecting and etc. That part's not fun, right? But if I could get
right,
through it and from a flow state standpoint, because I'm doing so great on all the stuff that I really love to do, I'm knocking out that bill piece at the end of the month, lickety split, right? Because
right.
I'm in so much of a better mood. So I love this. Now, if you and I know it's a 4-week program, we're going to talk a little bit about and give the viewers and listeners some information to follow up on how they can actually sign up for the program. But if founders wanted to implement one key or powerful change that they could potentially make to start implementing flow states today, what would you recommend that be?
Just one, hey.
Yeah, or a couple of just I want them to actually obviously sign up for the program as well, so I don't want you to give away your secret sauce, but I do want you to share like, "Hey, there are some little these are not, things that you're gonna suggest they do when people go back to their, day to day and go, man, that's just so impractical. I'm not gonna be able to like, sit 6 times a day and meditate for 15 minutes separately." And you hear so many of these impractical kind of like advice, based tips on how to get into some of these flow states. And sometimes you feel like you're spending more work and more energy trying to do the steps than you are actually doing the work you intended to to improve
Right.
on. So, a couple of key, tips or things that people
Yeah.
can just start doing today. And I like, one of the ones I'm going to stand up and just say that I've actually taken from our first conversation is getting outside more. And I'm an outdoors person, but I don't do the best job of doing it during the workday. And so
Right.
I have done a more concentrated effort of doing that, especially in the morning, and it has actually paid dividends to my productivity.
Okay. All right. So yeah. So the number one thing would be, and you actually hit it on there, is intention. So I'll give a little context around that now. So there's a few pieces behind it.
Mm,
So what ends up happening when you have a clear intention or clear purpose that's behind like why you want to do something, like set that objective. That now is the target we're going for. And from a neurochemical standpoint, what really happens, this turns into goal-directed behavior, which is unconscious drive for us to go and do and pursue. So there's like a nucleus in our brain, so full of all these neurochemicals that really respond to dopamine. And when you set a goal, that now activates this little nucleus. Like, okay, so every step
ah,
you take or every movement, any action you take towards
yeah,
that, you
yeah,
get rewarded with dopamine and norepinephrine. It says that was great, do it again.
yeah,
And so
yeah,
everything you do, so now this becomes this effortless momentum, just pushing you towards it. And so, but you have to have that goal or that objective for this whole process to start take place. So when you have a clear objective or intention about something, so it's back to doing the stuff you don't want to do of you're accounting your payroll at the end of the month. But if you have the intention is like, oh, I want to go and get this done so I can get back to the cool things I want to do. Then all of a sudden, every time you go and you open up that book, it's like fueling you. Yes, do this, get through this. And so it doesn't make a grind. You're not burning your energy at that. You're
yeah,
actually fueling it, so it's effortless to go through and accomplish that. So when we go into it, another side of like, what does that look like or what does that feel like sometimes for us? Is sometimes we should ourselves. And what I mean by that is like, it's like, oh man, I should really sit down and do this payroll. Like, oh boy. Like now it's like, do you really want to do this? No, not at all. So what you're doing now you're burning all of your energy, all your effort to do this. And it's hard work. That's grind. That's grit that you don't want to be spending on that. You want to spend that on the other pursuits that,
yeah,
motivate you and fuel you. But when you turn it into this, oh, I actually want to do this because I got to get it done, and it's going to enable me more time to do things that I want to do. Then all of a sudden, that sets the objective or the goal, the intention for you, and so everything you do towards it is
Ah,
going to be
man.
effortless.
Such
So it's
a smooth trick. I love that. I don't should yourself, right? It's almost like don't shoot yourself or don't should yourself. Like,
yeah,
like you're shooting yourself by shooting yourself, right? Like,
that's right.
and when we play this on the screen, this will be captioned, so I know people are watching should and shoot run across the screen and thinking like, what's going on? Okay, I'm glad you took this off mute and actually listened to what Dr. Heber and I were talking about. But I digress, right? I think it's such a good statement and a way to think about it because I do that all the time, Dr. Heber. I mean, all the time I do the classic, like, man, I know I should do X. And I'm usually saying it because I'm about to do Y. Right. Like
right,
I usually am saying, I know I should do my bills today, but I'm going to go and work on this creative part of the project, which is the stuff I really like to work on. Right. So I will push kind of more technical, numbers based work for some of the more creative strategy based stuff that I work on all the time. And I'll phrase it as a should. So I love that. I
right.
love that.
Yeah, and like to have a little more around that, it's like so if you should yourself in one area, then you're right because you usually want to go do this like oh, I should
Yeah.
do this, but you're usually gonna go through and do the other thing. But now when we get into like talk about the whole flow follows focus, well now you just drop this should in there, so it's still occupying part of your operating system in the
Yeah.
background. So that's what we call cognitive load. So even though you're not focused on it, it's still sitting there saying, "Hey, you should be doing this," and meanwhile now you're trying to do this.
In a
But so
way.
you're
Yeah.
distracted from this. You're not
Yeah.
accomplishing anything
Yeah.
here, and you're not
Yeah.
doing that.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like
Yeah.
you're losing on both ends. So
Man,
that's where you get
so
clear
true.
on it. That's like, okay, great. Now you're motivated to do the one. It gives you more there. You're more productive in each of them, and that's the win. So small little simple tweaks, all coming down to intention,
Sheesh.
make a huge difference at the end of the day.
That's so that's so poignant because I think to your point, I'm again, you're almost like writing the book of Dana in terms of some of the challenges that I've had as well in that sense that you stack up kind of these I need to or I should do. And you're right. Like I keep them in the back of my head almost all the
Right.
time. I know the should do's all the time,
yeah.
right? Like I know where they are, like at all times. And it's crazy that you just mentioned that because I just realized even today before I got on this call, there's like three should things that I need to do today that are mostly present on my mind. There's actually a couple of things that I want to do that are not
Right.
kind of popping up to the top of my mind, right? Until this conversation kind of put it in perspective. So, man, really appreciate that advice. I hope the audience really took a lot from that particular piece as well. I mean, flow follows focus, folks. You have got to really take that one to heart, right? And don't should yourself. Don't should yourself
Right.
because
Yeah.
that's just going to erode that ability of yours to focus, and then you never get to the flow. You never get to the
That's right.
flow.
Yeah.
Man, I this has been such an insightful conversation, Dr. Heber. I cannot tell you how much I want to just keep it going. But before we move from this particular part of the conversation, where can our audience learn more about Flow OS and connect with you for future sprint sessions?
Well, I have a couple of things that I can send to you, whether it's having available on the website.
Yep.
I have them available on my website as well. So it's just mh-elevate.com. Or else email, Instagram are some of the best ways to go through and do it. So my email is just Dr. Heber at that mh-elevate.com. I'll send it all over to you so you can go through and find me. But yeah, that's sort of mainly it. Is sort of some of these high level, information pieces that just sort of describe, okay, what are the pain points you're suffering, and then this program how it goes through and tries to help to address those problems and actually drive you to that, continued peak performance. Yeah, so those are the best ways: website, email. I like to go through and have these discovery calls and conversations. That's really where
Yep.
it's unique to everybody. The problems are very common, but we usually have to think that, oh, this is a unique to me sort of situation. And so it's nice that we be able to go through and talk to that. So yeah, usually helping these discovery calls, sign up, and yeah, we just sort of go through and get to work on it.
Hey, I love this. I mean, I cannot thank you enough, Dr. Heber, for sharing that information. mh-elevate.com. Make sure you go out and check him out on all of his platforms. We will have that information on our website, thebrandblueprint.biz, not .com, because we're about the biz. But make sure you go out and check that website out after the episode releases. We will have Dr. Heber's information and your ability to connect with them there as well. I also want to make sure, though, you check out the Flow OS and share that with people that you know can benefit from it. Because look, folks, we've got to make sure that we're doing everything we can, not just to hit those desired flow states, but to reduce the stress, reduce those negative things that are preventing you from obtaining or achieving those objectives that you've set for yourself. And so I can't thank Dr. Heber enough for coming on and sharing this information today. If you're an entrepreneur looking to break free from burnout, optimize your performance, this is definitely a program to explore, and this is the doctor to call, right? So make sure you do that. And I want to just make sure we leave you one more time, like, don't should yourself. Like, make sure you understand, right, that focus follows or flow follows focus. And so in order to get to those two states, you're going to have to make some intentional efforts. And I think Dr. Heber just gave you a great blueprint to do that today. So thanks again for coming on the show, Dr. Heber. We're looking forward to having you back soon. Also want to shout out Canada, our northern buddies, friends, partners, and family members. Despite what our government may be talking crazy about right now, we out here, especially in my community, love our folks up north, and I'm looking forward to actually getting up to Canada at some point in the near future and hanging out with you, Dr. Heber. So thanks again for coming on the show. This is the Brand Blueprint. Like us, follow us, share. If you don't do any of that, I tend to think you're a hater. Don't be a hater. Be a follower, be a lover, be a friend of the show, and definitely go out and check Dr. Heber's information out as well. Thanks again, and we'll see you the next time on the Brand Blueprint. Thanks for joining us on the Brand Blueprint journey. Make sure to follow us on all of our social media platforms to stay updated. Watch the full episodes on our YouTube channel for an in-depth experience. Don't forget to subscribe to our website at thebrandblueprint.biz for exclusive content and materials. We're everywhere you need us to be.